What's going on, Jaguars fans? Welcome in to this episode of Jags Now, presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks, where ahead of the Jaguars' first training camp practice that is set to take place tomorrow, they went ahead and made a signing, and a sneaky signing at that, to the cornerback position, where they also made a corresponding move in placing a certain player on the reserve/retired list. And we'll get into that here in just a moment on today's show, along just with some other kind of loose thoughts that I had around Cole Van Lannon and the latest around him. But guys, if you enjoy content around your Jacksonville Jaguars and want to be informed, consider hitting that like button. The more likes we get on this video, the more this video does get potentially put out to other Jaguars fans. And I'm trying to build a community here on the channel. So if you could, it's completely 100% free. If you just hit the like button, I would greatly appreciate it. So the Jaguars today, in corresponding moves, signed Corey Ballentine, the former Dallas Cowboy and New England Patriots player from 2025, where he played a combined 6 games. He's actually played for 6 teams in his 7-year career. Started off drafted by the New York Giants in the 6th round of the 2019 NFL Draft out of Washburn College. He's actually born in Jamaica, fun fact. So he's been in this league for a good amount of time. He's a 30-year-old corner. It's been a lot of productive ball in terms of, kind of being as a depth piece, but he stuck around, right, being somebody that has made a name for himself in the National Football League. Is he quite at the peak of his powers? I wouldn't necessarily say so. Did sparingly play for both the Cowboys and the Patriots last year. And in a corresponding move, Dane Jackson was placed on the reserve retired list by Jacksonville, as he has officially announced his retirement from the National Football League. And he was somebody that I always considered a long shot to potentially make the Jaguars roster at the cornerback position. And we'll dive into more of the cornerback room and where I think Ballentine could potentially look to contribute/compete at in terms of, making a roster for the 2026 NFL season. But just a little more information on Ballentine. I also just wanted to make sure that we touched on the Dane Jackson news as well. Jackson's played for, like I mentioned, 6 teams. Start off with the New York Giants, where he played his first 13 games of his career. And then during the 2020 season, the second year in the league, was then played with both the Giants and the Jets, so both New York area teams, along with obviously he didn't play with the Buffaloes, but not in that portion of New York, I should say. And then in 2021, played with the Detroit Lions for 4 games, then played with the Green Bay Packers, where he stuck around for 3 seasons, his longest tenure with a NFL franchise during his NFL career. Played with the Packers from 2022 to 2024. There also, I believe, may have been some crossover. I'm not 100% sure, so let me literally look this up on the fly. I do apologize about this. I think there was some crossover with Anthony Campanelli, I believe, who obviously he came over from the Green Bay Packers as a linebacker coach/run game coordinator. So not necessarily working with the line or the corners at the time, but at least there's some overlap there between Ballentine and one of the Jaguars' now defensive coordinators. So there's some familiarity there. And I'm sure Campanelli maybe was asked during this process, hey, should we, what do you think about potentially bringing in Ballentine? And I think he's somebody that is going to compete for a roster spot. He could very well be a training camp body. Didn't have the greatest stats last year. In fact, let me just pull him up here real quick. Had 2 total tackles last year. I think they were both on special teams. In his career, he has only 103 tackles. He does have 9 pass breakups and 1 interception in 75 career games. So mostly he's been a journeyman cornerback, but I think he's somebody that just because he doesn't have a lot of stats doesn't mean he can't contribute. And we're going to talk about that kind of on the back half of today's episode. But guys, we would not be able to do today's show if it wasn't for our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. Baseball is well underway, along with a ton of other sports that you can cash in with on Prize Picks. Football is right around the corner, so make sure you're locked in with Prize Picks as it's the best place to win cash while watching sports. You can choose from numerous stat projections on Prize Picks, including passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, points, rebounds, assists, hits, home runs, strikeouts, and a whole lot more. And the app is really easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. For example, I've got a 2-player football season lineup, $20 to win 60, where I've got Emeka Buka. I think he's going to be the main target in Tampa's offense this year, giving him more on his receiving yards. And then Basil Tootin, I think he's going to be the RB1 in Jacksonville. Give me the more on his rushing yards. Again, that is a $20 lineup to win 60 there. But not only that, guys, new user offer alert. Play your first $5 lineup and get $150 in lineups if you win that initial lineup. Just use code HMA when you sign up. That's right. PrizePicks just switched up their offer, so there's no better time to join in. Lock in and win that first lineup. That's code HMA at sign up to get $150 in bonus lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, code HMA. Download the app now. It is always good to be right with our friends at PrizePicks. So getting into more of Corey Ballentine here, we obviously just read off his stats before talking about our wonderful friends at PrizePicks. And while I do think that Ballentine's not necessarily going to be somebody that you want to contribute in terms of actually taking snaps at corner, that doesn't mean he can't provide value. I think he's been a special teams player who's been a journeyman, but he's obviously kind of built his career on providing that physical toughness in that aspect of the game, which coaches value, believe it or not. And I actually talked to our Cowboys host, Tom Downey, who obviously Ballentine played with the Cowboys last season, and this is what he had to say on Ballentine. Career journeyman, got added to Dallas midseason or on the practice squad, active roster for the last few games, mostly special team stuff. So, again, somebody that not necessarily making a roster, but can contribute on special teams as he did for the Cowboys last year, and clearly teams value that. If you're looking at the Jaguars kind of cornerback room just visually in your head, you've obviously got Travis Hunter and Monteric Brown, who are going to be your two starting outside guys whenever they're on the field. You obviously have Jordan Lewis, who is going to be your starting nickel, or at least presumably it will be, with Jarian Jones being that corner that can really play both, a lot of different positions in the secondary nickel or on the outside. And I think he's a really good corner four. In fact, you can make the argument one of the best corner fours in the National Football League. But then you get to the more depth part of the roster. And this is where I think a guy like Ballentine could compete, right? Because you have a guy like Jabbar Muhammad, who was a UDFA last year. He's been a really big bright spot in the offseason program for the Jaguars so far. Could he potentially push for a guy like Muhammad's spot, who was competing with a guy like Christian Braswell, who played both inside and outside last year, gave Jacksonville some good reps whenever they needed him to. I think Jacksonville and Anthony Campanelli are going to really – obviously you have to earn every position, but I think Braswell's got a really good chance to make this roster, for the upcoming season. And I think, if you're Ballentine, you're just going to have to find a way to prove your value on special teams being that kind of level in order to kind of contribute, because even with, Jabbar Muhammad and I would say Christian Braswell is the main guys, maybe a guy like Devin Marshall could also be somebody that the Jaguars look to keep. And I would consider those four guys maybe fighting for one or two positions on the Jaguars kind of cornerback roster. But Ballentine's experience is somebody, right, where you've seen the Jaguars bring in a couple of veterans in different kind of spots this offseason. They obviously added Amir Abdullah to the running back room this offseason as just kind of a veteran that, has been around the NFL, knows the kind of protocol when you're trying to install things that, people can trust. I think that was kind of a noteworthy add for Jacksonville. They tried to they obviously added Chris Rodriguez to the running back room as well, but he's kind of more of you have a plan for him and a vision. The Jaguars also tried to add Jake Bobo to this roster before Seattle Seahawks ultimately matched the deal from Jacksonville. And I think with Ballentine, he's going to be a guy that you probably would look at to play nickel if you're having him play any snaps at all. Can he be a guy that Jacksonville looks at and says, okay, we think you're so good on special teams that we're going to have you, chances are, behind Jordan Lewis, who, knock on wood, I hope he doesn't get injured again, but he did get hurt last year. He's also an older nickel cornerback. Behind a guy like Jarian Jones, and does he potentially push a guy like Christian Braswell? Does he potentially push a guy like Jabbar Muhammad? We'll wait and see. Chances are, if I had to make a prediction on Ballentine, I would say he's probably more of a training camp body, but I'm going to ask you guys before we get out of here, if you guys had to, what's your one-word reaction to the Jaguars signing Corey Ballentine? Mine was kind of just overall intriguing. I think he's a guy that, like I said, the Jaguars don't seem to be the team that is making moves for the sake of making moves. I do think this is a Ballentine move that was calculated. Obviously, with Dane Jackson being on that reserve retired list. He obviously being the other kind of notable veteran that the Jaguars brought in. And I think they want somebody like that during training camp. But also, what's your confidence level in the Jaguars cornerback room heading into the 2026 NFL season? I feel very confident in the talent. The question is the health and reliability. Obviously, you got Travis Hunter playing both sides of the ball. Knock on wood, he stays healthy. And then Jordan Lewis, can he stay healthy? Because if so, the Jaguars cornerback room definitely has the talent to be one of the better cornerback rooms, not only in the AFC South, but I think in the entire AFC and the NFL as a whole. That will conclude today's episode of Jags Now, presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. Guys, training camp, the first practice starts tomorrow. We will have some content here on the channel talking about whatever comes out of practice with regards to any players, maybe Liam Cohen talks, whatever the case may be. So make sure you guys subscribe, turn on your notifications for all things Jacksonville Jaguars. And until next time, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.